A foggy crossroads sits before the mountain of spiritual ascension. Here, many souls have arrived at the beginning stages of passive religion or the stirring of transcendent philosophy. One path, we are told, will surely lead us straight up the mountain. Countless thousands have walked it before us. Songs, symbols, and ancient ceremonies are all related to this road. The other path, they say, leads to a proliferation of side trails and windings and stops at the occasional tributary and cavern. Surely this way of many ways is too unmanaged to be safe. For down there we hear the many species of barking goblins will tempt us with chests of gold and half-dressed beauties. Desires and ghouls will haunt us without protection from the masses. Eloquent and garishly dressed speakers shout these warnings from the mounds above the well-trodden road. They promise that salvation atop the mountain comes easy. All we must do is abide by their guidelines and march in the footprints of so many who have gone before. Yet we find the crossroads obscured by a heady, scented fog, which seems, with every switch in the wind, to mask some odorous, long-rotting detritus we cannot see. Does no one else detect this? Or does everyone perceive it and say nothing? As the doubt of the well-trodden path enters us, we wait beside the crossroads and stare down at the conformists walking shoulder to shoulder, those who would have us believe they know which way is best, for they have mastered the memorization of words that tell them so. However, they have not scaled the mountain themselves. Up there at that mountain peak, jutting above the fog, where we will meet death and rebirth. And so the herd shuffles where it is told to, ignoring or scoffing at those who pause to question the path. Some rogues turn back from the matted road and beg us to carve our own way, suggesting the clear light of tranquil introspection and harmony with the self is not a power to be bestowed, but an internal resource we can tap at any time. We lend an ear to these outstanding others who seek the way up that mountain which none have tread before. The herd sees that we are not alone now. With their power in numbers, they have devised many insults and oaths about the ill fate of our souls. And yet souls we have all the same, like them. Some weak of heart rejoin the throng at the fear of isolation, even though God is promised to be made of love, even though God wants for nothing. Others remain at our sides off trail, and we wonder if they smile like us every time they are told what they cannot do. The mountaintop exists, we say. Does it matter which path we take to reach it? Now the thrill of uncertainty rises against the fear. We step down through unmarked trails lined with thorns and thickets, for we have heard the promises and the warnings, the rules and the words of ancient people. Now it is our time to face the mountain, to shelter under our own words and deeds when the storm sweeps away the comforts. For if God is in us, if God has given rise to all, there must be a reason we feel compelled to answer the inward call. As the transcendentalist American philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson once asked, why should not we also enjoy an original relation to the universe? Why should not we have a poetry and philosophy of insight and not of tradition, and a religion by revelation to us and not the history of theirs? The purpose of this essay is to build a framework for a new and untethered universalism, an open-ended philosophy of the soul and unified reality. Universalism neither needs to affirm nor deny any religious prophet, any religious scripture, or any sectarian tradition. A fitting symbol for this philosophy would be our local star, which shines over all things indiscriminately. As the foremost local symbol for God, the sun is the premier heavenly object for meditation, because the true spiritual doctrine is one which, by default, extends and applies throughout the universe, much as stars are the beacons of light in the furthest visible reaches of it. Universalists do not profess to know every mechanical and metaphysical quality of God's consciousness, but know that we, as souls, partake of that consciousness, as there is no other consciousness to be. While the underlying quantum qualities of reality are useful to pursue, none of this knowledge will ever change the fact that God, or all that is, necessarily applies to everything in existence, taking for granted that existence stretches into infinitude beyond our linear understanding. The universal philosophy is not a series of pithy axioms or narrative stories. It is an approach to spiritual realism, which by merit of such an open-minded pursuit implies that any maxim, any story that can serve to convey it, can be used. It recognizes that there is but one singular spiritual quality in the universe, a quality that creates the basis for variety. Indeed, there is nowhere in which it is not found. The Universalist initiate can find God, truth, and value in the words of any religious teaching, any philosophical school, and any legitimate method. Considering God as our attempt at applying a title to the fundamental existence, by appropriate definition, there is no child and no soul left out of this creation. God's greatest fruits and eternal being do not alter on account of God's creations having a flawed understanding of it. Since all mankind is born with a great degree of ignorance bearing upon whatever previous state the soul took before this incarnation, it would not follow that an all-encompassing, unconditionally loving God would leave out room for even the souls who turn away, deny, and curse the very idea of God. Universalism recognizes only but a few laws and a few facts of reality. Laws, however, which do not require or insist upon belief. An approach to these laws would include the law of one, which states that all things are fundamentally connected and brought into being through a single divine intelligence. The law of here and now states that there is only one moment in creation. The experience of time itself is merely the changing point of view of that single moment. And wherever you go, wherever you are connected to every place. There is technically no such thing as a difference of location, only the experience of it. And the law of existence, which states you will always exist as a point of view in greater and lesser states, and there is nothing that can be done to change that. Finally, the law of change has it that everything changes, everything is always in a state of flux except for the laws themselves. Change, therefore, is never subjected to change. What Universalism will attempt to do is build a foundation of structural principles, like these laws, which proposes a bedrock to a limitless experience. The Universalist may accept additional religious dogmas only in so much as these are useful to them, and not demanded to be accepted by others. Souls would not all come into the earth experience being one mind about everything. God implies such a grandiosity of variety that uniformity becomes nonsensical. Simply because one or two particular religious doctrines have influenced the majority's belief systems cannot mean there is special punishment for the souls who do not follow. Neither does it mean that those subscribing to a religion are not aligning with a tradition appropriate for themselves. The adherents to dogmas, nevertheless created by man, are not the same as the laws inherent in reality. But as beliefs, they certainly do alter how that reality is experienced. These laws are not to be confused with anthropocentric laws of nations, but are forever mysterious in what is made possible by them. They are laws that remove all limiter functions and invite the experiencer to engage with them in a manner that aligns with individual excitement, because the path of dread is never in alignment, no matter what religious cloak it claims to wear. Considering God must be perfect and God's perfection reaches through all of existence, then the free will of souls necessitates the capability of exploring the darkness as well. We are allowed to explore the depths of ignorance and the illusions of divine detachment to such a degree that we may forget our souls. This is often the natural state of the materially masked reality in which we find ourselves, it does not follow that we would be capable of experiencing the illusion of separation unless something in that experience aligned with free will, something we could learn from and integrate with a future, self-determined, positive state. This means that all the perspectives that could exist and all aspects of consciousness are validated merely on account of their existence. Whether or not they are correct is an entirely separate issue. Any doctrine suggesting that it alone bears the true knowledge of the spiritual reality encompassing the entire universe will always fall short of converting independent thinkers. It supposes itself to be God, the maker of the spiritual laws. Where universalism professes to be unique lies in its ability to unite differences of opinion around the fewest number of transcendent truths. Not everyone is moved by the same variable. One of us finds God in the bloom of the first flower in spring, in the minute scratchings of an ant colony laboring for a great work, whereas another may deny any divine presence even if they were raised into the seventh rung of heaven and slapped with the out-of-body ecstasy of hermetic ascension. One soul brings with it a natural knowing of divinity, as if they have been airlifted to the peak of the mountain from birth, whereas another soul, for whatever reason, finds that skepticism, criticism, or agnosticism are somehow more relevant to their experience. Who are we to say both are not equally living out the themes their souls have individually selected? Selected, that is, on account of free will existing prior to physical birth. What is it for us to say that another's path, whether it be total optimism or total pessimism, total belief in God or total atheism, is somehow invalid in the universe simply on account of the differences in beliefs? We certainly feel strongly validated about our own opinions on the matter. Rather, this is a testimony of the true breadth of God and the conditional limits of spiritual understanding in the present paradigm on earth. Who can say God is not made more evident through spiritual variety? For if there is a name for God that better brings goosebumps to your skin and energizes you toward your most heartfelt calling, what good reason is there not to use that name? God's energy already stretches throughout the entirety of everything that is and ever will be, without any evidential reliance on any human being's beliefs bearing upon that reality. Where religions fall short are when they come packaged with a rule book that doesn't apply to the future people who will need some new kind of exploration more fitting for the times. The independent mystic who has an out-of-body experience in her bedroom can hardly credit the religious cleric with spiritual wisdom if the cleric suggests that the mystical experience was not made possible by God, but by demons. That is, if the experience is accepted at all. When we limit or ground ourselves to a religion, we may constrict our belief of what is possible and take on airs of superiority in our presumed facts, while decrying others for having only false opinions. This road too easily leads to a spiritual narcissism, which is forever a backward and deceitful understanding. A universalist worldview, on the other hand, does not require our belief or our knowingness. It is an attempt at spiritual realism, which takes into account the objective subjectivity of every individual. It does not require that we ever encounter any scripture or any passing mention of any prophet whatsoever. Since it is overwhelmingly likely that sentient life exists across the universe, among the trillions of other galaxies, the idea that only at one time, on one planet, a conscious being has discovered the superior spiritual truth is at worst suggestive of slobbering sectarian ignorance, at best dogmatic religious narcissism. It is only by the most archaic understanding that we could ever profess that without the possession of one single book, our soul will be affected and perhaps even to some degree denied the benefits and priority given to those who happen to possess this book, who happen to possess some more perfect understanding and interpretation of that book, and happen to have a version of that book where the inaccuracies of other versions have not muddied the holy water entirely. Universalism sees how across the world the crucial spiritual themes have remained anomalously similar. coexisting with such a degree of similarity that they reinforce the common spiritual truths over and above the dogmas of isolated local religions. There have ever been mystics of every religious tradition, mystical experiences which encounter similar lights, feelings, and guides. The specific religious subscription is less of a prerequisite and more of an affectation. It could only follow in the most close-minded of beliefs to consider that merely on account of a subscription to a sect, our experience as a spiritual being transcends the rest, or worse, renders other alleged spiritual experiences as obsolete. How dare they discover the mystical ambrosia of the soul without first consulting my text and my prophet? Consciousness rather transcends the man-made boundaries that do admittedly help keep some of us oriented. Dividing lines are as useful as long-standing traditions. But simply because uncounted millions of humans have believed a thing does not mean we benefit in believing it too. Consciousness does not require any belief in itself or anything outside of itself in order to experience consciousness. If we live in a spiritual reality already, there is in fact nothing that isn't spiritual. Every experience of spiritual salvation, which we might pin down as a soul's transcendence of any further need to experience life on this plane, is another unique way in which a droplet of God's oceanic consciousness can experience the ocean. Universalism, which I say without being wedded to the title itself, is the spiritual philosophy of the future, in that it is not confined by any historical inaccuracy, any mistake of translation, any ethnic group, class, dogma, or system of speculation dominant at one particular place with one specific people at a given time. Universalism prevails because it looks beyond the earth and out into the heavens and professes that the same spiritual fundamentals that pervade this world should also extend to the furthest reaches of space and into the most mind-melting trans-dimensional planes we are as of yet incapable of perceiving. Universalism embodies the notion that consciousness is non-linear and that separation from the divine reality is not possible. We are never outside of the spirit world. We are souls which have bodies, not bodies who have souls. Given infinity and free will, we must imagine that an experience of plunging into the darkness of separation has its uses. The novelty of separation and fear is what allows us to create a new appreciation for life. Why not imagine in this thought experiment that instead of Earth being the home of low-vibration souls clinging to the shadows of sensual desires, we are actually a school of hardened spirits who have decided to play out this drama for exact reasons. The dark night of the soul calls forth from the light within, and once the light of truth comes forth, the blind shall see again. Given immortality, what is it to our immortal souls if we play out the dramas of wars and disease and pain and tragedy? May we not be showing other souls in the universe a new perspective of God that was once imperceptible? May we not be showing to our future selves what kind of experiences we most prefer by having the ones we do not? Universalism does not require a specific kind of ceremony, ritual, or physical expression in order for its spiritual virtues to be beheld. Neither does it dismiss the utility of any of them. It rather suggests that your belief and your state of being are the variables that have an effect. God does not require your belief to exist. A man suffering extreme brain damage who has never encountered a religious dogma will not be blocked from the gates of heaven for not having even the possibility of accepting the dogma. If every physical representation of every religious writing or spiritual teaching is suddenly destroyed, a new and adequate teaching will arise, because the truth has remained the truth, unaltered. Given a certain period, the former and destroyed teachings would cease to matter at all. This is not to say that existing spiritual teachings do not affect the soul, perhaps even how the soul navigates the immediate, post-death reality. It is rather the case that our belief is the controlling cause of that effect, not the teachings themselves. Universalism is a positive spiritual perspective. not limited by the fear-based speculation of presumed authorities. It is not divisive or destructive. It does not seek superiority or long for any one-dimensional tradition to spread across the world like a conquering nation. It implies the more accurate situation, which shows that every individual already designs their beliefs and will to their best ability pursue what they believe to be most beneficial. Universalism takes into account that the same teaching does not apply to every individual the same. It will not be relevant to everyone to sift through metaphysical complexities. It will not be relevant for everyone to be satisfied by simplicity. Universal philosophy recognizes that the differences in humanity's beliefs emphasize the full extension of divinity. By necessity, the multifarious forms of reality will express themselves anyway, so why not have the various creations also celebrate life across a spectrum? Surely if you had been born under different circumstances, you may now hold different beliefs, equally justifiable in your experience. This, in itself, is a universal circumstance. The universalist approach allows us to more completely embody the totality of God, in that we are not limited to one set of permission slips to take the same actions. Rather, we rely on that inner voice that is within our heart and does not need external permission. And when the inner voice is quiet, we search for where our excitement leads us, trusting that God has no boundaries for us unless we put them there. How could one who is called to positive action through their own meditation believe that they are denying God through answering that call, if the action does not line up with a set of religious guidelines or man-made institutions? Are we not taught across all religions not to fear? One who studies the history of religion finds that its adherents often feel compelled to defend and memorize minutiae. The Universalist proclaims that the same truths persist no matter what the writings say. Beautiful teachings are helpful nonetheless. A map can lead us through a smoother path up the mountain, but the path still exists if the map is burned in the fire. Universalism suggests that the strongest spiritual belief will hold, even if all religious writings and oral traditions go up in smoke. The fundamental existence of God and our role in that story did not cease to exist prior to the adoption of a religion. The sun still shines no matter what we preach. The sun is still necessary for our survival, no matter how much we would deny its light from our eyes. If we believe we cannot recreate and establish an original spiritual doctrine from consciousness and experience itself, then who among us really believes? Universalism is not dependent on human action. It does not rely on historical records. A universalist does not get caught up in the alleged blasphemies of rendering a physical icon of a god or of a prophet. A universalist does not think that her thoughts or actions somehow have a changing effect on all that is. Rather, they are empowered to believe that with thought and action, they can change how they experience it. They can be involved in a co-creation impossible to make without them. If your God or your perspective of God says that God will exhibit negative human-like emotions based on our actions, then your God is no more powerful than the physical human being. And God does not want, God is. Universalism shrugs at self-proclaimed spiritual authority. It congratulates those who humble themselves before the many rivers of the great mystery. While we may value complex theology and metaphysical abstraction in one moment, the truth does not hinge upon them. If minor differences in religious thought produce anger and the need for domination among religious adherents, this is a sign of a weakness of belief, not a proof of God's will. Under the yawning black jowls of the cosmos, smile back and be loved. The world will take our bodies no matter what we whisper about the gods. Faith is often too synonymous with hope. Hope is often too synonymous with doubt. The initiate, however, knows immortality to be the case, even when the others proclaim that such a thing cannot be known, though they profess total faith in something all the same. Whether or not we'd like to comment on it, everyone believes totally in something. Without some degree of belief about the world, we would not be able to navigate the kitchen floor, never mind the human experience. The case for a more universal philosophy may better take root when the practices of mystical experiences become ubiquitous. If it excites you to reset your beliefs and approach the universe with a fresh mission, God is with you still. If it grounds you to obscure your beliefs behind pillars of intellection, then by all means, erect your most stubborn temple. It is not illegal to make an insider trade with God and sing as you deposit the profits. There are too many blocks in the quarry for only one shape to suit the spiritual temple, but there is one that is inevitably yours, not the next man's. What evens your block may scar theirs, though both strokes arise from the same virtue. Get used to looking at the stars and saying, "I will not die discovering that I have not lived. I will live knowing that I do not die." A confident believer does not let chance govern that glorious moment when the mind bursts open. Under the trillions of stars, who can tell you what is most suited to your soul but you? Even if you find confirmation in the words of ancient mystics, it is not the ancient mystic doing the confirming. That power lies solely in you. Inscribed plaques stand at the roadsides and off the many trails leading up the mountain, but they cannot read themselves. The mountain's secret is that salvation is universal, but you are an agent with free will. What you do has consequences, and thankfully so. The limits or the unfettered charisma of your imagination have immediate effects. Hermes Trismegistus taught that ascension is the realization of the expansive powers of God inside your consciousness. Perceive then that, like God, you are already on the moon, smelling the forest, blowing in the southwest wind, trading wits with the angels. You are behind the eyes of a spider on a spaceship. You are rich and you are poor. You are a king and you are the one who overthrows him. You are everywhere and every there where a here can be. The odds are, in fact, highly stacked against your ability to know the limits to consciousness. The secret is that there are no secrets, only temporary mysteries. The ego is not meant to control this sojourn of mortality, but to make sure your feet land in the proper place as you hike up Mount Olympus. And standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing. I see all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part or particle of God. Thank you for watching. Go ahead and drop-kick the like button and ignore my Patreon and my one-time donation links below in the description. Have a good climb.